Hey guys, Dr. Decks here. Today I'm gonna talk to you about different types of cuts that you can make on different types of saws. So don't forget to click that subscribe button if you get anything out of this video. All right, so what I have here is a compound sliding miter saw, and you wanna know what miter means, okay? So there's a couple different ways we cut on this saw. One is we just cut it at a 90-degree cut, which basically we set the saw to 0 degrees. It's 0 degrees tilted this way. This saw is a compound sliding miter saw, which means it'll turn this way, which is a bevel, and it also turns this way, which is a miter, okay? And when you do a combination of those two, that's a compound miter. I guess it could be called a compound bevel, but they call it a compound miter. I didn't make the rule, that's just how it goes. So if you want to cut a miter is basically any degree that you choose that's not 0. So let's just say a 15-degree cut to the right or left would be a 15-degree miter. Okay, so if I cut a miter, there's 15 degrees. There's my cut. That's a miter going this way. This is a 90-degree angle. This is an angle off of that at 15. That is a 15-degree miter. So let's just say I want to cut a bevel. I'm putting the saw back to 0, and now I'm going to turn the saw this way 15 degrees. I'm just going to read right off of my gauge right here, and this saw will bevel right or left, which is kind of cool. So it's very flexible that way. So now I'm just going to cut a straight 90-degree cut with a 15-degree bevel in it. This would be a 15-degree bevel. We tried a 15-degree bevel, but you couldn't really see it good on camera, so I'm gonna cut a 45 so you can really see it. That's a 45-degree bevel. Those are two cuts, right? Now let's do a compound miter. We have it tilted 45 degrees on a bevel this way, and let's put it back on a 15-degree miter this way. Now we're cutting a compound miter. So this might be hard to see, but you got 45 degrees going this way, and you have 15 degrees going this way. That's called the compound miter, okay? So that's basically what this saw does. It cuts right, left, in different directions at different angles to pretty much give you what you need for those specific cuts. Okay, so just quickly, we have a cross cut, basically a 90-degree cut, which actually is where you're cutting cross grain. So we call that a cross cut. And then we also have all these different angles of miters. Some of them are very common, so they have these little indents in the chop saw, right? And that's a locker, so I can pull this pin and turn the saw and then let go of the pin, and it'll auto lock at certain degrees. So 15 degrees is an automatic, 22.5 degrees is an automatic, 31.6 is an automatic, and then 45 goes as an automatic as well. The most commonly used angles that we use as deck builders are 0, 45, and 22.5. And it's always nice to have those positive locking stops on your saw so that you just know, okay, there's 0. Now I can lock that down, and if somebody bumps this, it's probably not going to move too much out of the way. So I just wanted to go over that. So those are the common numbers. So if we're just cutting a 0-degree angle, sometimes they call it a 90-degree, but it's a 0 degree on the saw. Or you can say, hey, cut me a 90-degree angle at this length. Or I might say, hey, cut me this length at 15 degrees to the long point, and you're locking at 15 and cutting to the long point. So just a little bit of terminology on the chop saw as we're putting together these parts. All right, so now we're over at our table saw, and there's some terminology of cuts that we use with the table saw. Some of them are similar to the chop saw. The one thing that this saw does really well that we use for every day is called ripping. So ripping is basically taking a board and taking it down to a specific width. So I might say rip a board down to 3.5. Okay, so this board's 4.25, but it's also has a small bevel on it. We're gonna take the bevel off, and we're gonna rip this down to 3.5, like so. Just remember, guys, if you're ever in the striker plate with your fingers, always use one of these. Always use a push stick, okay? Even if my fingers are close to this, I'm gonna use a push stick. So I'm definitely gonna use one on this rip. All right, so now we pretty much have a board ripped to our width. You can also tilt the blade and then rip a bevel on your board as well for whatever purpose that you need it for. This saw will also do cross cuts. So that's another term. And sometimes you can use your fence as a stop gauge. If you had a bunch of boards you want to cross cut, there's a gauge on board the saw and it has a locking mechanism or teeth that slides into this groove. So you can actually do a cross cut. So normally I wouldn't put the fence against it, but sometimes it's nice for as far as depth gauge if you have multiple cuts that you want to cross cut. But for today, we're not going to use it like that. We're just going to lock that out of the way, and then you can just cross cut this board like so. You can take this cross cutting jig, and it has a couple slots in it. You can actually screw a taller plate to if you have taller materials that you're trying to cross cut. You can turn this gauge into different angles if you wanted to cut any various angle that you see on this guide, like so. Okay, for today we're just going to do a 90-degree cross cut on the table saw. So we're just going to slide that in there. Let's just say we have our mark on our board right here. We're going to hold it nice and tight and snug against our jig, line it up, and then fire away. And the reason they call it a cross cut is because you're cutting across the grain of the board. You're not cutting with the grain, you're cutting against it. So it's called a cross cut. All right, a couple other terminologies that we use while we're using either table saws or routers is a dado. Dado and maybe a rabbet. Now, a dado and a rabbet are similar. A dado means you're going to maybe stack multiple thicknesses of blades on your table saw and actually cut out a section of the board like this. So that would be a dado. A rabbet is going to be where you're cutting out a section on the end of a board like so. And that we can do with the table saw. We don't have to stack multiple blades. We just have to be careful about the depth. So we'll go ahead and cut a rabbet out really quick, get that handled, and show you that one. I'm gonna go ahead and take this and cut it down into a shorter board really quick. Let's just say I want to cut a rabbet out of this, like a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch. Well, we'll go 3/4 by 3/4. Maybe we have something we need to notch around or notch over, and I'm just going to use my square. I'm not even gonna pull out my tape. I'm just gonna draw a 3/4 by 3/4 inch notch, and there's the X, which means that's the part I want to take out. And a really quick and easy way to do this for me is I will set this right up on my saw and I'll set the depth first. So I'll pull the blade down to the height I want, like so. So now I know I'm cutting at the proper height of the blade. And then I'm going to bring the fence over right to where I want the cut. So now I have the height figured out and I have the depth figured out for that side of the rabbet. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that. And now that I have that side cut out, I'm gonna go ahead and mark and set the fence. I've already marked it, but I'm gonna set the fence to this side and I'm gonna rip this through. And there's your rabbet. Actually, it looks like my blade is a little too deep right here. So I would probably, that's what's good about just taking a scrap piece and checking it to make sure that you didn't overdo the depth of your blade, or if it's not working quite right, you can figure that out. So what I would do is just make it a slight adjustment and either open this up a little bit more, or if this is the exact size I need, I would have to drop the blade just a little bit and check it again. So what I'm gonna do is, because this is a scrap, I'm gonna drop the blade level just a little bit and try that again. I don't know if you guys can see that, but this board's pretty wonky. It's got a pretty hard curve in it just for such a short board, so that might be part of our problem as well. But while we got this, let's go ahead and try that again. That one looks a little bit more acceptable. So now we've got a really cool looking board with a little S in it, 20 bucks. All right, guys. And one other thing I have, one other tool I use to make different types of cuts is a router. Sometimes you might have to just make a notch out of a board or clear a space for a screw or a fastener. This is called a plunge router. So it's got a spring activated lever over here that you can actually change the depth of this router if you want to. I'm just gonna leave it where it is because it's set for about 3/8 of an inch, which is great for if you're trying to get material moved out of the way for fasteners, which we're gonna have to do here in a little bit when we start wrapping some posts and beams and we have hardware in the way. So I'm gonna show you how that works. There's a couple different ways you can do this. With the plunge router, if you have enough length on the bit that it sits below the level of the plate, you can plunge right in. Unfortunately for me, my bit is pretty long. So the plate is extended all the way out and the bit still sticks out further than that. So I'm just gonna plunge from the side. I'm just gonna kind of lean into it to get my hole made. So I'm gonna start like this and start the router up and drop it in. Okay, here we go. So that works really well for just being able to clear material. And sometimes I have to clear a lot of materials. This would also work, like the router, you can get all kinds of different bits for it. You can get a rabbet bit that'll actually make this type of cut in the side of a board. And instead of using a table saw, you can use this tool as well. So sometimes I might have to take a whole level or section of this board out. So I might just like scribble across here like so. And if I want to be accurate, I can even take my square and go, okay, I need to take that whole section out to clear a bracket, like let's say a strong tie ML24Z's in the way or something like that. So I might need to route all this out. I'm going to do this by hand, by freehanding it. I'm not going to set up a board and try to keep it nice and straight. This is all going to be concealed, so I'm just going to route out this whole section and show you. Now, I would start from the outside edge and work my way in, and there might be a few blowouts and things like that. So if you're doing finish work, this may not be the right application for you, but if you're just trying to move material to remove it, to get it out of the way, this is probably right up your alley, okay? So here we go. There you go. There's a notch. Cool, guys. All right, so that's some terminology of different types of cuts. If you have any more that you want to talk about, leave them in the comments below. There's probably 1,000 we didn't cover today, but this is more of a basic video for all those DIYers and people that may not know the terminology. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to click that subscribe button and hit the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. Thanks for watching this video. We really appreciate you. Thanks for coming to our channel and checking us out. Have a great day.